Hello and welcome back to the Wheel Talk podcast. My name is Abby Mickey. Whew. We're here to talk about the Olympic road race. I'm joined by Loren Rowney.
Good morning, everyone. I've barely slept. I was just pumped up on adrenaline and it was a rough night. A good night, but a rough one.
Well, we'll talk about your adrenaline because you were actually on the course, which must have been quite the experience. Gracie Elvin, definitely not on the course.
Hey. I had a different broken night of sleep. I watched the race in chunks while I was breastfeeding, so a little bit different. But I'm excited to hear about Loren's experience.
Yeah. First, I think I went to the 2012 Olympics to watch teammates in the time trial, but that was a completely different experience. I mean, London was fantastic, but it was a very much kind of like this. I went in the morning and left in the late evening. But there to be on the road race course, like it was a last minute decision to go down to Paris. I live in Bruges, so it's actually quite a short train trip. Was just incredible. Like I went with a group of people from the Cassane Fitzhouse. So it's like a cycling house in Belgium, basically, where young riders come from all over the world to try and race in Belgium. So it was just a really nice experience to be with like these really young riders, like 18, 19, 20, a whole bunch of girls, and then one young Aussie supporter, Herbie, for the boys. And yeah, just experience it with them. I felt like I was a young rider again in London when I was 22. So yeah, definitely I had goosebumps all day. So we went to the start near the Eiffel Tower, managed to see a couple of the riders, but you know what it's like, it's the Olympics. So everyone's a bit nervous, but a few came over to say hello, which is really cool for the young athletes that I was with. And then after the finish, we headed up to Montmartre. So with the iconic Sacré-Cœur background there, the monument on the hill. And as we were like walking up the hill, like the streets around that area, I think it's a very artistic part of Paris. It's gorgeous, like but it was quiet.
Where like all the big artists used to.
Yeah, so there's like really cool cafes and everything, and you could see like it felt like a lot of Parisians were in that area, but it felt quiet, and it was like a Sunday afternoon, and I was thinking, are there going to be crowds on the hill? Oh, maybe we're going to get a sweet spot, because like we were a little bit late. We probably had to get there 2 hours before, and then we're walking up, and all of a sudden it was just like boom, people were there. Same amount of people, I think, as what we saw in the men's race on Saturday. And I was like, holy moly, this is crazy. We got ourselves a spot just when they crested the climb. So the first 2 laps, we got to watch them sort of come over the top. And then I was like, I'd seen the TV shots on my phone of the Sacré-Cœur and the crowd that was like on the side of the hill. And I'm like, I've got to get up there and get amongst it. And I'm so glad I did for that final lap when we'll get into the race, but when Marianne Vos crested with Blanca Vos, and like I was looking at my phone, it was like 12 seconds. But then all of a sudden you see Lotte Kopecky drilling it over the front with Kristen Faulkner. And I was like, oh my God, that is not 12 seconds, but we'll get into it. It was just an incredible experience. There were just people there from all over the world, and like it was just so iconic, and the view and just the weather, and it all came together on that day. And yeah, I've still got goosebumps. It was an incredible experience.
Man, it was so cool. I mean, I wasn't there for the women's race. We opted to have a family day and spend the day in the Olympic Village with Toms and everything after the men's race. But for the men's race, it was like totally insane, and it was just really cool to see Paris and how they've done the Olympics. And you and I were talking about this off the podcast about how, you know, this Olympics seems to have a very different vibe than the last couple of Olympics. And I think like Paris has just done such an amazing job with all the venues and the kind of sustainable aspect of how they've approached the games, but also just like the security is amazing. I was talking to one of our friends who lives in Paris full time, and she was telling us that like all of her friends who are Parisians had left the city for the games because they were so nervous about security and how crazy it was going to be. But actually the the Paris Olympic people brought in police from like Italy, Spain, Great Britain. So Paris has never been safer than it is right now for the Olympics. Like taking the subways and stuff or the metro, it's like it's never been safer to just be like wandering around
And
the
just
streets
super
of Paris.
organized.
Yeah, and it's
Like-
just like incredible. Like they've added lines to the metro, so it's really easy to get places. For the men's race, we were like Lila had to take a nap, and so we were at our hotel, which was kind of near the Eiffel Tower, and when she woke up, we took the subway up and we were on the climb, really probably quite close to where you were for the first couple laps, watching from a window, like down into the street to see Toms go by. And then we were like, okay, well, based on how the race was going, we really need to get to the finish. So, but before the third time they came up, we like jumped on the metro and went down, and we missed the finish, but we got there just in time to like see him right after the finish. And it was just like really, really insane how easy it was to get around. And she was like, that's not how it normally is. It is not like that. But it was cool. I feel like, I don't know, I'm just really impressed with I'm impressed with Paris. I don't know how LA is going to come close to the ease and safety that Paris has been able to pull off. And the course that they put together was just amazing. Like both the men and the women, the course, the first, I think for the men's, it could probably be a little shorter. Maybe also for the women, maybe throw in an extra lap, because it was just so cool to have the circuit in the city and have so many fans be able to be on the circuit and see it. Like the streets were packed, and it was just amazing to see that many people. And you saw people from like every nation out there supporting their nation. I saw so many Dutch people dressed head to toe in orange, which is just quite the sight to see. And and it's just so cool to have like in like the city center of a city that is so old with so much history and like so many iconic things about it, them racing around the city streets. And it would be really, really cool if the ASO is watching this and kind of taking note of how this stage went this race went, with the climb in the city and the circuits and stuff, because it was just like such a cool race. And I think the only thing I would change about the actual course would just have it be more circuits, like more like Glasgow, with like maybe one out in the country loop just to add kilometers really, and then like have the bulk of the race be on the circuits, because it was just such an amazing course, the circuits.
Well, I mean, for both races, we're not going to get into the men's, but it really kicked off there, didn't it? That was really where the race kicked off. And I guess, I don't know where you want to start today, Abby, with how do we unpack it? But I guess I think something we should talk about is the break that was up the road and the great representation of different nations in that break. And I just want to give a shout out to the Afghani riders. They did incredibly well.
Yeah, I mean, part of the beauty of the Olympics is having so many countries represented in a race that there are less representing the big countries that we always see in cycling, because there's only 4 Dutch riders and 4 Italians, which are normally the 2 nations that pretty much dominate the worlds. There's way more opportunity for the single riders from other nations to actually be seen in the race. And a lot of times they are the ones that go up the road early just to get their flag on TV. And it's one of my favorite things about the Olympic road race. Honestly, it's just really cool to see that there are women from other nations that are, they don't get a chance to race the World Tour races. It's a lot harder for them to get into a World Tour team, get over to Europe, get all the resources that you need to be at the level where you need to be to race those races. It's just, there's way more complications involved and money, and visas are a huge problem when it comes to a lot of those nations, especially the African nations. So just so cool to see them up the road in any situation. And we do see some riders off the front, of the worlds, but it's always a very different race. And this is a race where literally anything can happen. We saw that in Tokyo, and I agree. I just absolutely loved.
Yeah, and I like that they were enjoying the crowds as well. There was one point on the coverage where she was like trying to get people to cheer them as they were coming into the city, and definitely like want to give kudos to the UCI for an unusual occasion is that they have that development program for athletes that come from smaller nations, and I think that actually is making a difference. So I don't know fully how it runs, but to see athletes coming from some of those nations performing in Paris, actually that's the best we've seen some of those nations, African nations, and like the Afghan riders, and they weren't struggling like they have in the past. For sure, they weren't on the same level as the top riders, but like they actually did themselves really proud. And I think that's a lot in, due to the UCI's program that they get to come and stay in Aigle.
The race. So we had the early break that was doomed from the start, and then it all popped off when they got back into Paris with attacks just left, right, and center into the city and onto the course, the circuit that they did. Great Britain did a really great job animating the race. They were all over the place. But when it really started to break apart was on the first approach to the climb. There was a crash midway, pretty close to the front of the bunch with Chloe Daggart going down and Elise Shabby. And it was on a quite tight turn. So that, coupled with Kristen Faulkner on the front, putting a lot of pressure on the race, split the race in half. And we had a select group up the road that only included one Dutch rider in Marianne Vos. So Wiebes, who they were in theory racing for that day, was behind with Demi Vollering. And Kopecky also missed that split, but she bridged solo to the group in front. That group, there was a lot of action in that group, a lot of action in the group behind. But what ended up happening was a just absolutely brilliant move by Lizzie Deignan. Her and Anna Henderson were off the back, and Anna Henderson did all the work to bring Lizzie back and then slingshotted Lizzie off the front as soon as they hit that group. And so it was just like, it was like a textbook teamwork situation. She was followed by Blanca Vos and Marianne Vos. Unfortunately, Lizzie couldn't keep the pace of those two, so she got dropped, but that was kind of one of the biggest moves of the day. And then Vas and Vos were off the front, the two of them working super well together. The group behind was closing, but not quite fast enough. So Kristen Faulkner and Lotte Kopecky bridged the two of them. A lot of it was Kristen Faulkner just putting the hammer down, as Cicely Uttrup-Ludwig would say. They caught up with the two out front, and immediately Faulkner went with 3.8 kilometers to go. Vas was able to almost follow it for a second for like 700 meters, and then the elastic snapped. They looked at each other, and the race was over. In a split second, just that tiny bit of hesitation. Faulkner is such a strong rider. She's done this in the past. She did this to win the stage of the Vuelta earlier this year. She was gone, road to victory with a sprint for the final two places on the podium. Very, very, very close between the three, but Vos took silver and Lotte Kopecky bronze, with Vas coming in fourth after getting fourth in the mountain bike race in Tokyo.
Brutal. In that race situation as well to get fourth, but I don't want to focus on that. I think we need to talk about this crash on the first ascent of Montmartre and how that impacted the race and how some of the big riders missed out on that, because once that happened, and I had some people, I mean, it was pretty chaotic to be there and try and follow the race at the same time on my phone. But that was something that I was thinking about. And I had these young riders asking me, they're like, if that crash hadn't happened, would we have seen the same outcome? And yeah, you can and you can't think like that. But I think some riders, unfortunately, got caught up, and just that was the end of their day, basically.
There was enough strong riders in the front selection that it made the race, and a lot of it was down to the entire GB team made that selection. There were three of them, so they were super keen to keep it going. Elisa Longo-Borghini was keen to keep it going. Naomi Ruig was keen to keep it going. Like, everyone who made that selection was like, we are in the best position in this entire race. And in the group behind, it was really only Vollering doing any of the work, trying to get Wiebes back into that group. So it was basically like one versus the group out front. And had maybe Kashani-Wadoma done a little bit of work earlier on, or had anyone, the Aussies, had anyone jumped on the wheel of Kopecky when she bridged to that group, which she did very, very quickly. Like, it's just a mark of how talented she is and how astute she is with the race, that she was able to react as quickly as she did to bridge to that group, because no one else reacted that quickly. But the riders out front were in the best position ever. They were like, yes, this is exactly what we want. And so, of course, the crash impacted the race, but it was also going into that corner. If you were behind, if you were that far behind, like, it wasn't like Chloe was third wheel. She was like, 1/3 of the way back on the bunch, maybe closer to the front, but she still wasn't at the front of that group. So if you were already behind her, you were in the wrong position. Like, there were so many riders that were just not in a good place. If it hadn't been Chloe, it maybe would have been someone else. So that was like, yeah, it took out a lot of the top riders, especially the Dutch team, but it was a completely unavoidable. It was an avoidable situation for riders like Kashani-Wadoma and Vollering and Wiebes and Kopecky, where they should have been in a better position going into that corner, because they knew what was coming next. They took that corner and then they went into the climb, and that's where Faulkner put the pressure on. And obviously there's no radios, so Faulkner wouldn't have known that Chloe had just went down. So they'd pre-planned for her to, put pressure on at that point. And they knew that was a really, really important point in the race. And every other rider in the race would have known that as well. And so they were poorly positioned, and that is their fault.
Yeah. And I just think, like, Loretta Hansen, if you go back and look at the coverage, she is the rider who led it into that corner. And then about 8-9 riders back, that's where Dygert crashed on the inside. So she did a great job for herself, but actually for Australia. And it's just a shame she didn't have her riders on her wheel, because I think then that could have potentially, I don't know how Ruby's day went, but put someone from Australia, and I'm purely talking about Australia right now, in a better position for the rest of the race. Because the riders who missed that split, they were just on the back foot the whole day. And like you said, Abby, that group was just so strong in itself. The race was done. It was going to come from that group. And it did in the end. And I mean, no one wanted to help the Netherlands, I guess, because of what's happened previously. So it's always a gamble.
Oh, why would you want to? Yeah, why would you want to? Why would you want to help Wiebes or Vollering in that situation? Vollering's been so dominant, and Wiebes, had she been anywhere near the front of that race, she could have won. So there's in no world would any rider be looking at the situation and be like, I'm going to help them get to the front. At the same time, then you've lost the race.
Yeah.
And with that many riders off the front, like, not only can you not control where your situation is in the race, you also can't control what's going on in front. And they wouldn't know that there were attacks flying off that front group as well, and splits happening there, and that, they were out of contention being in the second group on the road. But as they were the second group on the road, they were becoming the third group on the road, and then they were becoming the fourth group on the road. And it wasn't until really late in the race that we saw riders like Kashani-Wadoma kind of strike out on their own and be like, screw it, I'm going to go now. And so, yeah, it was, the race definitely could have gone a lot differently.
And it was still so exciting, crash or no crash.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a brilliant race, and I enjoyed watching it. And in the finale, I had, really mixed feelings, because it was just a textbook move from Faulkner. Like you said, we've seen this before. We know she's going to do something like that. And that was her card to play once she got there. You knew she was going to go. And it's just a question. It's like, Kopecky, the amount of work she did all day to make sure she was putting herself back in the race in the right position. And then that brilliant attack from Marianne Vos and Blanca Vos to go up the road, just the two of them. And then for this to happen in the last 3 or so kilometers, it's just, as a viewer, you get so frustrated, because it's like, in those moments, it has to be so instinctual, and you can't you can't hesitate and think, oh, if I go and chase it now, the next person's going to go, and then maybe I won't follow that. It's like you just have to, as the BMXer would say, just fucking go.
I just noticed that a lot of riders just didn't have a very good day. And I think there was some of the top riders that we've seen competing so well all season, and they might have had good prep in the week. And it's something that I've experienced before, is that you freshen up almost too much for a major event, and your legs just don't come good on the day, and it's really frustrating because you've done everything right. And I just got that sense that a lot of riders had that kind of day. And it was a big mistake, mostly by the Dutch, to not follow Kopecky when she was trying to rectify her mistake. But like, there was a bunch of people that definitely should have been on that wheel, and I just don't think that they had the legs. Like, I think Weber's had a few moments that looked good, and she looked like she was trying to put herself in some good spots, but then ultimately her and Vollering, like, for sure that they didn't maybe get to race 100% within their capability because of the way that the race played out. But I also don't know if they were on it anyway that day. And you can definitely say that for the Aussies too. I think that they didn't make any mistakes. I think they actually did quite a good job with positioning, and Grace was there in that group and she just ran out of legs. And I think Loretta did a really good job, and Ruby also, but they just weren't quite on it that day. And it's not a reflection of their capability. It's just that, they just probably didn't feel that good. But I think a bunch of other riders were the same, like Longo Borghini, Niwa Doma. You could rattle off a few more big names there, Ludwig. So it was a big mistake, but I think just a lot of riders just didn't quite have it on the day, and that would really not feel good mentally as well as physically. So I felt for a lot of them that it's so frustrating that you have to wait every 4 years for a day like that, and then it's just not, it's really difficult to line up your training and your racing and that perfect feeling on that kind of day. Actually, not many people get that.
I was talking with my husband about it, and at least with cycling, and we've spoken about this, there's that question, is this the pinnacle of the sport? And when you look at the men's sport, I think a lot of the men, Abby, maybe you would have a bit of insight of this, would say no, this is not. Like, the World Championships, the Tour de France Femme, I think are becoming like these really big events too. So it's like I guess you can move past it, but yes, it only comes every 4 years. And perhaps as a cyclist, because the course always changes, it's not like swimming or track and field or rowing or something where it's the same thing every year. Your opportunity to shine on that day might only ever come once in your career because the course simply doesn't suit you. But I feel, I don't want to go off tangent, for the athletes that their whole careers are based off the Olympic cycles, like rowers. And I think, like, for the Australian rowing team, for example, they underperformed based on what they were expecting. And now they have to wait 4 more years. So I think it's always shit to not have the legs on a day like the Olympics. But I've never competed at the Olympics, but I wonder if it's something easier to get over than, say, another sport.
Yeah, I was thinking about this in regards to specifically Elise Longoborghini, because she, third in the last 2 Olympics and just won the Giro. So of all the riders, she probably came in with the highest expectations of herself. Kopecky obviously would have come in, hoping to win the race along with a handful of other riders, and every single rider on that start line probably dreamed of winning the race, but there was only a couple that actually could have been like, okay, I can win this race, and Longoborghini was one of them, and she just had a bad day. She did a really gut-wrenching interview after the race in Italian where she talked about how disappointed she was and apologized like 10 times to the fans. Which is just not necessary. I mean, she's incredibly kind, so I get where she's coming from, but just like, it was heartbreaking to read the interview, and I hope that I know she will bounce back before the tour because she's such an incredible athlete mentally and physically. But for her to have a bad day on Sunday in her career, where she is in life and her career, it's maybe the last chance she has at an Olympic gold medal. Maybe she'll still be around in 4 years for the LA Games, but she also, you know, is kind of going to crest the peak of her fitness at some point soon because she's been doing this for so long. And also like she's married. I'm sure that she like wants a family, which we know won't stop a career, but you kind of never know how someone's going to react to that. Like so far we've had riders, most of the riders who have had babies mid-career have come back pretty strong. But at some point there will be a rider who has a baby mid-career and goes, you know what, it's not something I want anymore. And who knows what will happen for Longoborghini in the next 4 years. And so I was thinking while I was reading the interview, I was thinking about her and her Olympic journey and what this race would have meant to her in the form that she's in now. And the course was good for her in theory. And she didn't have the legs on the day, and how heartbreaking that would be. And I think that the Olympics is different for cycling than it is for a lot of other sports, but it's still the Olympics. Like you take my husband, for example, he can say until the cows come home that he would rather win a rainbow jersey than an Olympic gold medal. But on the day when you're on the same time with a bronze medal and you just couldn't get there, it's like, that's still something that is probably going to stick with him for a really long time, because the Olympics transcends cycling. There are thousands of people all over the world watching the Olympic cycling events that aren't going to watch even the tour, that aren't going to watch any other races, and definitely aren't going to watch the world championships. And if you win a medal for your nation, it's something that you take home with you that will, you know, just go far, far beyond any accomplishment than you could get in the sport of cycling. And I think it's weighted very differently, like for cyclists than it is for other sports. Like you said, rowing, it's like, it's a completely different beast. For track and field, it literally can make or break your career, but it's just not the same for cycling. So it is an outlier in that sense when it comes to Olympic sports, but it's still the Olympics.
Yeah.
It would be a tough pill to swallow, and especially for riders who have done multiple Olympics. Like for Voss, her emotions at the finish line were probably what broke me a little bit, because this is her 5th Olympics. I mean, if she went on to race in LA, that would be insane. But I also think that that's going to be a really hard course, just given the terrain around LA and what they could throw into the race. It's going to be a lot more like Rio and Tokyo and favor riders that did well in events like that than it would have been for Paris, which was much more of a classic style course. And so for Voss, this was probably her last chance at winning another gold medal. And oh my God, imagine how cool that would be.
I think a key word is another gold medal.
Yeah,
because
12 years after,
the kids I was sitting with were like, oh, this is the one event that's eluded her. And I was like, were you not, maybe you were still a toddler in 2012. But no,
child?
Yeah, she has one of those in her cabinets of, you know, medals and trophies and everything. So yeah, another gold medal would have been lovely. But yeah.
It was looking so good for her too. I wouldn't have put it past Blanca Vas to beat her in a sprint. Like, it was still going to be like pretty cool to see them duke it out. But I think so many of us were just like, oh, this is a pretty cool story. If Marianne Vos can win this, I don't think anyone would begrudge that gold medal. And I don't think she did anything wrong. She raced really well. Blanca Vas raced awesome as well. And like Abby too, I was so sad afterwards watching her emotion. I was just devo for her, but she displayed such good sportsmanship at the end, with the interviews and the podium. And same for Kopecky. Like, arguably Kopecky would have been the most upset because she was really the favorite, out and out favorite, and would have put so much pressure on herself. And she probably knew that she'd kind of fucked up the most, I reckon, with that last few K. But both of them smiled on the podium, and you have to give them a lot of credit for that, for showing such good sportsmanship and not being like you're for sure allowed to show your emotion, but you don't want to see someone like looking disgruntled or angry or whatever. So you could see that they were emotional, but they were still smiling and still showing that it was like an honor to be up on the podium.
But how was Faulkner though? When Faulkner came through and she just kept riding, and I was like, looking around, we're like, does she think there's someone else up the road, or like?
See, this is the
she's
thing
going
about,
straight to recovery for the track.
This is
she's
the
going
thing
to get
about
her rice.
The Olympics and not having any radios. That
Yeah.
It's like, on the one hand, it's kind of cool to not have radios in an event because it adds like a level of chaos that we don't really see in other races. But it also means that like there's this teamwork aspect like is a lot harder to nail because you can't just like chat with people. Like Faulkner had no idea that Dygert would have gone down probably for a long time. Like I don't think she had time to go back to the car after that. Like on the circuits, it's too hectic. Those streets were so technical and there was so much going on at all times. And so like, yeah, I did wonder, like, does Faulkner think the race, like, is there more kilometers? Like, for sure she saw all the photographers, but I think she was just like so wrapped up in the effort and just staying away. Like we've seen riders this year and many times, like heck in Tokyo, like, you know, throw your arms in the air when you didn't actually win. So which is worse, like posting up and, you know, not having won the race, or like making sure that you win the race and then celebrating after, like with the flag in front of the Eiffel Tower and everything. But I mean, we have to talk about Faulkner and her move, because not only like there's so much backstory that goes into Faulkner's win. Dial it back to Tokyo. And remember that her first European road race was the Tour Féminine Ardèche in 2020. So she only started racing in Europe 4 years ago. And she was already, you know, she got 11th at Brabantse-Pijl that year. And the next year she won a stage of the Tour of Scandinavia or the Tour of Norway. And so she really, really quickly kind of made her way onto the European scene, having not raced pretty much at all in the U.S. Her only race in the U.S. that is notable was Cascade Classic in 2019. So she is very new to the sport in terms of like compared to the riders that she was in racing for a medal against Vass and Voss and Kopecky. And already in 2021, she wasn't selected for the Tokyo road race, and she arbitrated for that spot and tried to get on the Tokyo team with only, you know, half a year of experience really. And she eventually withdrew her legal case against USA Cycling. And I think for Americans, the Olympics is a huge deal, a lot like for the Australians and the British. Like English-speaking countries put a lot more weight into the Olympics than a lot of other nations. But she definitely would have not known from 2021 when she didn't get that selection that Paris was a goal. And then we've talked ad nauseum about the USA Cycling debacle of selection and how she was picked really last minute to race the road race, only when Taylor Knibb gave up her spot. It was only like a couple weeks ago that USA Cycling announced that Faulkner would do the road race. And all of that, in addition to the fact that, you know, she's not been in the sport very long, who she was up against and how she won the race is just insane. And we've maybe criticized her in the past about tactics and her bike handling, but it was like she was a completely different rider. And she was one of the strongest riders in the race. And we saw that when she bridged with Kopecky. Kopecky was maybe the other strongest rider in the race. So the two of them were just like, you know, neck and neck when it came to the physical ability. But what really struck me was her timing with her attack, because you have to be such an experienced rider to know when to make that move. And she didn't hesitate. And that's why I think she crossed the line without raising her arms, because she didn't hesitate. She was head down, just fully focused on how she was going to win that race. And that's how she won. And the three riders behind were playing the game, and that's what lost them the race. Instead of, just going purely on feel and going on strength, they looked at each other, and it was that split second that lost them the race. And Vass was the only one who reacted when Faulkner went, but she couldn't match Faulkner, and she couldn't get on her wheel. And as soon as Vass realized that she wasn't going to be able to bridge that gap and sat up, it was done. But at that point, that's when Kopecky needed to go. That's when Kopecky needed to react, and she didn't, and neither did Voss. And so it was just like such incredible timing and strength from Faulkner. Just such a amazing result, and even more amazing with everything that she's gone through this season with the selection process and the path that kind of brought her whole Olympic journey, really, including the arbitration for the Tokyo spot.
No, well said, Abby. And I think we should have pointed out right at the start of the podcast, because I saw some comments passing about that, the whole debacle with selection to begin with. The fact that maybe she wouldn't have even been in the race and we wouldn't be talking about this right now.
It's pretty amazing. Definitely a good story. But yeah, she made the winning move. There's no doubt about that. Like, I think we saw a proper race, and we can't be disappointed with how the race went, no matter who you're going for, because I think ultimately we got a real race. I wish there was more circuits. I think it would have made it more interesting, but overall, that second half of the race was a good and proper one. And Faulkner, I agree, like, she actually looked good, comfortable on the bike. Technically, she was following Kopecky more or less through most of those corners. Certainly didn't look as comfortable as Kopecky, but she was holding her own just fine.
She's just
yeah, exactly. But I think Kopecky was trying to be smart, and then she was too smart, and it all came undone. And I think Voss was in the toughest position once they were caught, because she was pretty tired by that point. You could tell in her body language, like, she was pulling hard with Blanka Voss. She wasn't foxing. They were going all in to get to the finish and then duke it out. They wouldn't have known those time gaps really at all, knowing that the two riders were coming up behind them. And you could just see that frustration and disappointment in Voss's face, that once she realized who was coming across. Very clever riding by Kopecky. I think she did have something left in the tank, even though she was kind of pretending that she didn't and making Faulkner do most of the work. But like, Faulkner did the exact right thing to attack them when she did, and not just because she won the race. Like, it was actually a good attack at the right moment. Even if it didn't work out, you'd be like, well, that was worth a try, because that's how you do it. And like, you're right, both of you, like, that was when Kopecky had to pick up the slack, because it was really her race to lose. I think it would have been glorious for Voss to win, but ultimately it was Kopecky's race to lose, and she needed to just finally spend that bit of energy at the end, because she probably could have beat all three of them, even if she had to do a bit more work than what she'd wanted to in the finale.
Yeah, well, we've seen her do that in Glasgow, where she put everything on the line, because that again was her race to lose, and she just went after every move and left nothing in the tank, basically. But I guess that's a really good point that you made, is when that group did come together, the only rider I think that could have really reacted to Faulkner was Kopecky. Because, like you said, Voss and Voss, they would have had nothing in the tank to be able to do that kind of effort. So, yeah, it is what it is. And Faulkner, it was just perfection.
Kopecky was
and
also
the time. Sorry. No, I was just going to say the distance she put in was insane, how quickly she got away.
Yeah, it was such a good acceleration. And like Kopecky at the same time, like Kopecky was already on her wheel when they caught the group. Like, Faulkner was the one who caught the group with Kopecky right behind her. And I think Kopecky at that point immediately switched her focus to Voss because that would have been her biggest competition in that group. But they really just underestimated Faulkner, which is wild because she's won World Tour races this way. And yeah, it was just looking at each other and that lapse in momentary reaction time.
I wonder what would have happened if like Kopecky had done the move of Faulkner. Like as they got on, like just like laid off the wheel a little bit and then boom, over the top. I mean, that's something she could do too. She can put out that sort of power for that effort. I'm excited now to see how it goes on the track, all the duking out of the battles, because Faulkner, what events is she in? Just the TP or?
And I don't know if she'll actually race the TP. I get the feeling that she was selected to the track team as a kind of easy way to put her in the road team in case Taylor Knibb gave up the spot, because it was like she didn't give up her spot early enough. They have to submit the riders to the Olympic, like say, okay, this is who's going to the Olympics for us in a timely fashion, and can't just like switch riders in and out within 2 weeks of the race. So I feel like they selected her for the TP team on the off chance that Taylor Knibb gave up her spot, just because of the way that the selection criteria was written this year. They couldn't have like been like, oh, Taylor Knibb, you got the spot, but we're actually not going to take you, because it was written so much in stone. So yeah, they had her on the track team kind of with the hope that they would be able to put her on the road team. So I don't know if she's actually going to do the trek. But maybe now that she's won a gold medal, they're like, look at that power.
Yeah. Look at her last 4-minute power.
We knew it was going to be a good one.
I'm so glad like I just bit the bullet and went down for the day. I was so cooked at the end of the day because like Gracie, even though my baby's quite a few months older, he does still keep me up at night. I was just so tired, but it was the best day out. And, you know, bumping into people, I saw some triathlon royalty there, Emma Snowsill, Nate Frodeno, sorry, with her husband Jan. Yeah, so they were there for the triathlon, and anyone who watched the triathlon, Emma was commentating in Australia, I think. Well, she was there on the ground. So that was really cool. And then just to experience it, like I said, with some really young athletes who are here racing in Belgium, and they've got those big bright eyes, and it was just, yeah, it was fun. It was iconic, and like where the race started and finished was just insane. Insane.
Whatever kind of like disillusionment I think that we've all been feeling about the Olympics in the last couple of years, I do feel that Paris has kind of wiped that away a little bit. It's
like brought back the magic or something. I feel like I'm an 11-year-old watching the 2000 Olympics again.
Yeah, I'm so inspired. And like going on Instagram, there's like so many cool reels about people being like so jacked up watching female athletes and like making cool compilations of all the different body types and like just rad stuff that women are doing. And it makes me feel good watching it. And I'm definitely obsessed with some of the female athletes that are doing lots of different sports. But like, I totally agree with you guys. Paris has just nailed it. Like to have that finish line with the Eiffel Tower in the background, like it'd be crazy if they didn't do it, but it's amazing that they did do it. And like so many other events too have had such fabulous backdrops. I think like it's crazy that one of the biggest cities in the world can do that over a 2-week period. So kudos to the event organizers. Like apart from the river cleanliness, I think everything else has gone very well by the look of it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of magic kind of brought back into it. And walking around the Olympic Village was just amazing because you see you can see that there are so many different body types and so many different athletes of different nationalities like hanging out together, which is super cool. And it was like, man, what a rad thing to see. And I mean, we know in cycling that all the riders are friends with each other. Like, I don't know if you guys saw the video of Grace and Allison Jackson dancing at the back of the peloton before the start. But like, yeah, that's a thing in cycling, but it's just so cool to see in other sports as well that is a reality, and everyone's supporting each other. And I saw a stat that I don't know if it's still true as of today. It is not, because Noah Lyles won the 100 meters last night in what was a totally insane race. But prior to yesterday, all the USA's individual gold medals were won by women. And I think for Australia, you guys have a similar stat about like the majority of the gold medals are women, which is just so rad. And it's the first year that it's 50-50, that the percentages of men, women are the same. And so we're seeing a lot more women win gold medals because there's a lot more on offer, which is just really, really cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Key point. But is everyone like a bit obsessed? I guess everyone in the world knows who Ilona Maher is. Is that what he said?
Are you joking? Do we know
Instagram,
who Ilona
TikTok?
Maher is? She's the only person who I was like, Toms, if you see Ilona Maher in the village.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with her. She's posted so many good videos. She's amazing. She's like the person I'm most obsessed with at the moment, I think.
Yeah, I mean, she single-handedly got like the entire nation of America into rugby.
Yeah, it's insane.
Like
insane.
The amount of people that have discovered rugby.
Fringe.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, that's like one of our national sports in Australia. So it's pretty cool to see.
They're gonna be so bummed when the Americans now know what it is, and it's never good.
Oh, no.
Never good for the rest
coming
of the
for us. No, that's one sport I was like, oh, you know what? Because I used to play a lot of touch football. Like, man, if I could go back, maybe rugby sevens. That would have been cool.
You would have been so good.
I've got a big build. I'm sure I can bulk up. Yeah. Without like the broken collarbones and everything.
Did you see?
Yeah, you would have been fast on the wing.
Yeah, I was a winger, right wing.
Did you see the Kiwi girl who's like an absolute legend of rugby? There was like this really amazing video, I think from earlier on in the preliminary games, maybe against, I don't know, against a nation that they just shouldn't have been paired with. Like they just steamrolled them. But she was like running with the ball, and there was another person from another team like running at her, and she just picked her up and like kept running to the goal.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's an amazing compilation of some of those rugby women just like absolutely charging through like 3 other players. I love it. So good.
Man, so cool. Well, in the world of cycling, I think that this was an Olympics to remember. We've obviously, like, Tokyo was had its moments, but holy crap, Paris has really delivered. The time trial and the road race were just amazing, and we're headed into the Tour de France Femme now, which is, I feel like I'm even more excited about the tour. Like, of course, we're excited about the tour every year, but now with the hype, I'm even more excited. And we have some breaking news. Breaking news as we're recording this podcast. Not breaking news for you if you're listening because it was yesterday, but Juliette Labousse on her way to FDJ Suez, Marta Cavalli on her way to DSM Firmenich. PostNL.
A little switcheroo.
Switch.
I do have one more question going back to the Olympics, sorry, before we do you think the Dutch team did themselves I'm lost for the right words. I got my brain. Do you think the Dutch team rectified what they did in Tokyo? Like, do you think that they've got a better reputation after this games as a group?
It's a good question.
Yes. I mean, we have to rewind back the whole race in a sense that, like, when that break went out, they took responsibility straight away, I guess, with Ellen van Dijk at one point to start bringing it back. So I think they knew, based on what happened in the previous Olympics, that they couldn't F it up again like that. And then, yeah, what happened when they got to the circuits, I think we've been over this, but there'll be mixed feelings about it. Like, it's great that Voss was where she was. Like you said, maybe Wiebes didn't have the legs she needed on the day, and the same with Vollering. But had they put themselves in a better position as well, leading into those circuits, would they have been deeper into the race with the front group? And then how would have that impacted the race? I don't know.
I feel
Because
that
groups,
there is a world where the Dutch led into that corner where Chloe crashed and split the field. The combination of Chloe on the ground and Faulkner up on the front split the field. There's a world where the Dutch led into that corner knowing how important it was going into the climb, and one of them won this race. Like, I think that they will be they're definitely coming out of it looking better than they did in Tokyo. But I don't think anyone is going to be happy with how the race went. Like, obviously, Wiebes isn't going to be happy because she was a favorite to win, and the Dutch were saying going into the race that she was their A plan and they were riding for her. Vollering's not going to be happy because she loves to win bike races. And she also would have been probably the only rider on that team that would have been like also happy to see Wiebes win, given that they're kind of friends, maybe. Voss isn't going to be happy because when you're Marianne Voss, second is second best. You still didn't win the race. The Dutch aren't going to be happy because the Dutch love to win bike races and they're the best team in the race and the best nation in the world at bike racing, for the women at least. So I think it's really mixed because I really think that had they been in a better position leading into that corner, which I cannot stress enough how important that corner was, that they would have won this race. They had the strongest team in the race and they didn't win. So they did something wrong.
do you think as well sometimes when you're put like in such a race like the Olympics, when something like that happens and you're put on the back foot and you already start to feel like maybe you're out of the race, then it's like a part of you, Vollering was chasing to try and get them back, but was she ever going to be able to do it? It's like, was there a part of them that kind of knew this is it? I know Wiebes then tried to go again on the climb, but it wasn't realistically going to happen.
And one more question, which has probably been done to death already, but like, should there be race radios at the Olympics?
There's not at Worlds, right?
No.
So they followed the same. Yeah. So should there be race radios? I mean, they used to racing with, it's like this one race every 4 years, and then every year at the Worlds they don't race with radio. So it's like one time in the year basically riders don't race with radios.
Yeah. Like, I think that it's cool to see riders try and figure it out for themselves, but ultimately 2 races out of 50, it's not really the same then. It's not the same sport.
No, it's not. And I think in such a hectic, Gracie, we've been at Worlds and when they try to put boards on the course and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't really work because maybe you miss it or the information.
I was wondering where they were getting any info on this course in the men's race and the women's.
Well, that's why Remco lost his shit when he had a flat because he had no idea what his gap was.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm a huge advocate for race radios because it's a safety thing. Like, it really adds a level of safety that is needed in cycling because it's such a dangerous sport out on open roads with people and cars and whatever. And obviously the Olympics is a race that is like on lock. It is like impossible to get anywhere near the riders, like even after the finish. It's really, even for family, it's really, really hard to get anywhere near the riders. And so there is a lot of safety involved, but it's still, a completely open situation. That's not in a stadium. It's not controllable. It's not completely controllable. So there's a huge level of safety involved, but also because radios are introduced, they're like part of the sport. They're in the fabric of the sport, and they only do so much when it comes to actual tactics. It's more just like knowing what's going on in the race, which is impossible to know if you don't have radios because there's so many things going on at the same time. It's like cycling is not like football or, track and field where it's a short event. And so you can see everything that's happening and there's only so much space that the race takes up. It's like spread out over multiple kilometers with a ton of things happening at the same time. At home, we barely even saw what was going on in the race because once again, like with the time trial, it was the coverage left a little bit to be desired in terms of where the TV motos were and what they were showing. doing. Maybe they did a little better on the women's than the men's, because apparently like Tom's was attacking in the final kilometers of that group that he was in, and like I would have loved to see that. But yeah, I think radios are really, really important to cycling, and I get why people like to see people racing without radios. It definitely adds chaos, but there's enough chaos. Why do we need more?
I actually think that this race could have been a little bit better if they had radios. I think it could have been a little bit more interesting.
I mean, like Voss would have had no idea what was going on with her teammates behind. And especially on those circuits, all they would have had were boards on the side, because not a single one of them is going back to their team car. Yeah. So what's the point of even having teammates and it being a team sport if they can't communicate with each other? Communicating with your teammates is key to it being a team sport.
Yep.
Well, let's wrap this up. We already talked about Ilona Maher. She's all of our obsession.
Yeah.
But our next obsession is coming up.
Oh my God. Lauren, I'll see you in a week. Less than a week.
No, less than a week.
Oh my
see you
God.
on Saturday in Rotterdam. That's
exciting.
right,
That's
everyone.
so exciting.
Oh, Gracie will miss
I'm going to
you
miss
so much.
Gracie.
Oh, I'm excited for you guys. I'm sad to not be there, but it's going to be awesome. I'm going to be doing a little bit on the socials for Aussie stuff. So yeah, I'll be
cool.
kind of involved from Australia, which is pretty cool, because the tour and the Olympics, that's just the warm up for the women's Tour de France fun. Avec Zwift.
And there are so many riders that went into the Olympics with high expectations who didn't get what they wanted. It'll make the worlds a lot more exciting.
I think they're going to be, anyone who's racing now, the tour is going to be hungry to rectify, a potential bad day they had on Saturday. So
yeah.
Sunday.
Or riders that didn't get to go to the Olympics at all. I think there's a few.
Yeah, there's quite a few of those.
A couple of score of riders that have been doing some pretty hard training.
Look out for Puck. I think Puck Peterson is going to be pretty hungry to get out there and get something. But I think we should give the listeners, if they don't follow Zwift, this is just like a non-paid sort of thing, ad. But you can win a custom Watch the Femmes Zwift ride. I think you've seen if you follow any of the three of us, we've all been really lucky to receive a really nice Zwift ride, which is a game changer. I saw that Gracie did her first ride back on her Zwift ride. So there's a competition going. So I think listeners definitely check that out, because the paint job on it is just so cool.
Yeah, I saw it. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's very cool.
It'd be a nice addition to the bike garage or the living room. Like I've got mine set up in the living room. It's probably the nicest feature.
I'm loving mine. And again, like, it's so, like, I'm so grateful that they wanted to give us one each, but I can easily say good things about it. It's so nice to ride. It's amazing.
It's super fun. It definitely changes the game when it comes to indoor riding.
Yeah, for sure. And I like now that like my road bike is not on the trainer end, because
you can actually ride
that
it outside
rounding
where it's meant to ride.
Yeah, exactly. And the rounding rain is not so good.
I always feel like I'm going to break my road bike on the trainer. Not
like
that I'm putting out much power.
What bombs, Gracie?
Yeah, exactly.
My like really nice yellow Factor, like custom painted Factor bike, I'm actually afraid to put it on the trainer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We will be back next week with daily podcasts from the Women's Tour de France fam. Me, Loren, Tilda on the ground doing all the journalism, capital J journalism. And yeah, it'll be really fun. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. And you can find us on the Escape Collective Discord for members only. We're on there chatting everything from the women's road race to books to cats. I don't know, whatever.